Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Joining me today is Andreea Bourgeois, who is Senior Research Analyst for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks for joining us today, Andreea.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm interested in this business barometer report that CFIB released today. And one of the things that is quite interesting is what's the concerning things that are going on in the minds of entrepreneurs in Canada today. So what are the top things that they're concerned about right now?
Well, before I get to that, let me tell you how they feel.
Okay.
Right now, you know what? Because I mean, what's in your mind kind of determines how you feel, or you can look at it vice versa. But let me put it a big picture. They're not extremely down, but they're not, I can't say that they're very optimistic. You know, one of the things that we're measuring in this release today is their level of optimism. Yeah. But I'm not looking to see what their revenues are. When we ask them that question in the survey, we don't want them to take out receipts, to look at books, you know, to kind of balance sheets. We're just asking their gut feeling, you know? And over time, we have noticed that the sum of all those gut feelings from small business owners, it really tracks really well with GDP, which, as you know, it's a very statistical, you know, measurement and that kind of stuff. So their gut feeling, we're measuring that every month. And this is the month before Christmas shopping, you know, holiday shopping and stuff like that. Yeah. So we're kind of getting a bit of a gain compared to last month. Things are not great, but they're not that bad. September has been particularly pessimistic. Let's be honest about the word. And, you know, in statistics terms, we've seen the index, the optimist index over the short term being quite low. Right now, we're back up at 49.8. That number doesn't say much, but let me say that if it's below 50, this time it's like just about 50, that means that 1 in 2 business owners are optimistic about the future, the other one being pessimistic. So how I put that in a one word, they're uncertain. Again, they're not as bad as it could have been, but definitely things are not great. You know what I mean? Like just, So with that, when it's around the 50 mark, we're seeing uncertainty. And that uncertainty really comes from what is in the back of their minds, exactly as you said, you know, and they have a lot. They have seen this month in particular, they have seen changes to some federal support programs, the shortages of labor that have been worsening during these past few months. And there is a lot of mix up, you know, some people are off work for good reasons. Other people are looking for work, but business owners are looking for employees. Skilled or unskilled, and they have a hard time getting those employees. And the other things that we have all experienced it as customers, supply chain disruptions. And those top 3 factors are really affecting their gut feeling of optimism.
Mm-hmm. So when you look at some of the concerns where it comes to, say, the costs, let's look at the costs for example. What industries in particular are feeling that pain more than others?
Well, you know what, right now, when we're looking at the cost, one of the other things that we're tracking, if I can get a bit more, you know, specific with the terms, we're looking at, right now, we're looking at price and wage plans, because that in the way, you know, if your wage plans are to increase wages, obviously the cost of doing business is going to go up, right? Because wages is a significant part for most businesses. And specifically about wages, what we're seeing, we're asking business owners what they're kind of predicting, what they're expecting for the next 12 months to be the change in their average price. And the number is 3.1. It may seem low, it may seem high, it really depends where you stand. An economist will find it high, a normal person will say, well, what is a 3%? It's actually a quite significant increase. If you have to increase wages by an average of 3.1%, which is the highest we have ever been since we've been tracking this indicator, the overall cost of doing business is going to increase by way more than that. Therefore, when your costs are increasing, you have to recoup that money from somewhere. Prices are also estimated to increase, and prices are estimated to increase by about 4.3. This is huge. This, you know, in the past, that average price increase, it used to would be around 1.5 to, right now we're seeing double of that, 4.3. We have all been hearing, talks about inflation and stuff like that. So it's not surprising. But what is really surprising is by how much, right? If it's going to happen or not, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's kind of what they're expecting to do to their own business. You know what I mean? So if you want specifics about which industries are more affected about costs, right now what we're seeing in terms of we have another question where we're tracking the specific costs, what are their major cost constraints?
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone will be surprised if I say that wages and fuel and energy are the top two cost constraints that we've registered this month. Insurance and then taxes and regulations being the next ones. The one thing that has been particularly increasing in November, fuel and energy. It's always been a concern. So yes, it has been there, it's not surprising, but in particular this month, it has been a significant increase over that particular cost. Wages have been particularly high and particularly raised by many, many business owners as a significant cost constraint. So that one, I'm not saying that is not concerning, but it has been high for the past year. Fuel and energy has been somewhat lower, and all of a sudden, boom, we're seeing it really high.
Yeah. So when you look at I'm curious about just going back to the optimism for a second. One of the things I did notice in your CFIB's release today was that the retail industry had the biggest increase in short-term optimism. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's the case?
Sure. Well, so when we're talking about optimism, the way we're asking members, we're asking that level of optimism over a certain horizon, right? Over a certain period of time. And one of the things we're tracking is over the next 3 months, and the other one is about over the next 12 months. Now, let me backtrack for a second. Before the pandemic, we used to really look at that 12 months optimism level, because 12 months, it may be long, for me, for you, but for a business, it's not that long. They have to plan employees, they have to plan orders in, they have to plan products, what products are going to come to market, services. So that was really the indicator that we were matching against GDP, and it was doing a wonderful job. Now, guess what? Since the pandemic, asking someone about a time horizon of 12 months, it was like really asking someone on a Monday what they would like to eat next Monday.
Yeah.
It seems so far and so removed from any reality. That indicator has zigzagged a lot. It dropped in optimism, everything you can expect. So since then, we've been focusing on a much shorter term, the 3 months optimism. So in particular, this month, November, we have noticed that among all the industries, retail has been the one that has the highest gain of optimism over the short-term period. I don't think it's surprising. Retail usually is a pretty optimistic sector, It hasn't been that optimistic. They've had a lot of restrictions. They had a lot of red tape. So the pandemic has complicated a lot their life. If you think curbside become this kind, not this kind. It's been, and within a month, you can have a retail store closed and open, then closed with different restrictions or, capacitation limits. So with all that in mind, retail has seen a significant bump, almost 7 points gain in optimism. But let me tell you, the level is still only 52.7. So we're not that far, like it's not, we're in the 70s and, we're all optimistic and everyone is going to go out and buy and that kind of stuff. Again, this is not overall retail in the economy. This is retail sector from the small business perspective, right? This doesn't include Amazon and all those other large, online boutiques. So it's a good gain. It's good to see gains in optimism. It means, at least that sector is expecting to do somewhat good, but it's not something to jump up and down of joy.
Yeah. Also on the flip side, Andrea, you're looking at the hospitality industry was the largest loss in short-term optimism, right?
Exactly. And again, that one is an industry that has been so much affected by the pandemic. I mean, we've been 18 months into it, and tourism in particular has been affected significantly. So hospitality, I think they're kind of recouping because again, they've had in some places you could travel with significant restrictions and stuff like that, but overall they're down their capacity utilization, how they're using their everything they have in the business. It's much below anyone else industry. So they're not a sector that I would call optimistic. They had a drop this month. I don't think a lot of people are expecting to travel. So, there are not a lot of conferences happening. So everything that you think business travel definitely is affected. Travel for pleasure, again, people are thinking twice, it's an industry that has had to change, has had to deal with a lot. And just again, to quote you the level, it's abysmal. It's only at the 36.3. So for someone who doesn't like to see a number, who doesn't like to look at the chart, what that means, it means that you have 2 in 3 business owners who are actually pessimistic about the next 3 months. That's significant. That means, and when you say optimistic, pessimistic, well, how that translates, how that impacts business, it's very simple. A business that is not optimistic is not going to invest a lot, either in equipment or in new services, new products. It's not necessarily going to look to hire a lot of people. It's not going to look to either increase wages or, do extra training. So when a business doesn't buy something, well, that supplier doesn't get an order. You know what I mean? There is always a trickle effect. So that level of optimism showing pessimism, particularly for that hospitality sector, is not a good indication for the next couple of months. Again, seasonality plays a role. We're in November. The next 2 months are only covering December, January, and February. It's not when we travel the most, right?
Yeah, true.
Winter too. So seasonality plays a role in all of our factors.
Okay, super. Well, thank you, Andreea, for joining us today. That was super.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. That was Andreea Bourgeois, who is Senior Research Analyst with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.